The smell of floor wax and nervous sweat filled the Riverside Community Center as Robert Chen adjusted his black belt one final time. The October morning light streamed through the high windows of the converted gymnasium, illuminating dust particles that danced above the competition mats like tiny spirits. It was 1987, and karate tournaments in suburban California had become weekend rituals for dedicated families across the state. Robert stood near the bleachers, his weathered hands gripping the metal railing as he scanned the crowd for his 15-year-old daughter, Sarah. 2 years had passed since the car accident that claimed his wife Linda, and these tournaments had become their shared sanctuary. Sarah's dedication to Shotokan karate had intensified after her mother's death, channeling her grief into precise kicks and disciplined kata performances that would have made Linda proud. The sound system crackled to life as the tournament director announced the junior division competitors. Robert's chest swelled with quiet pride as Sarah's name echoed through the hall. She emerged from the warm-up area wearing her crisp white gi, her brown belt tied with the same meticulous attention to detail that Linda had taught her in everything from folding laundry to setting the dinner table. "Nervous?" Robert asked as Sarah approached him, her long black hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "Always," she replied with a small smile, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet. "But Sensei Martinez says nerves keep you sharp." Robert nodded, remembering his own competition days in the early 70s when karate was still finding its footing in American culture. He had earned his black belt through years of training at a small dojo in San Francisco's Chinatown, where the ancient traditions mixed uneasily with Western teaching methods. Now, 15 years later, these suburban tournaments drew hundreds of competitors from across Southern California. The first division began with the youngest students, their tiny white belts fluttering as they performed basic katas with varying degrees of success. Parents lined the bleachers with video cameras and instant cameras, documenting every kick and punch for posterity. The VHS camcorders were still expensive luxuries in 1987, but several families had invested in them to capture these precious moments. As the morning progressed, Robert found himself studying the other parents with the detached observation skills that 20 years as a mechanical engineer had honed. There was Mrs. Patterson, whose twin boys competed in every tournament within a 100-mile radius. Mr. Kowalski, a former Marine who treated his son's training like basic training, and dozens of other mothers and fathers who had discovered that karate offered their children something that traditional team sports could not: individual achievement measured by personal growth rather than victories over others. Sarah's division was called just before noon. Robert positioned himself near the scoring table where he could see her face clearly. She had drawn a tough bracket, including Jennifer Walsh, a red-headed girl from a prominent dojo in Orange County who had won 3 tournaments this season. Jennifer's technique was flawless, her movements flowing like water, and Robert had watched her compete enough times to know she would be Sarah's biggest challenge. The elimination rounds began with basic kata performances. Sarah executed her chosen form, Heian Yondan, with the controlled power that came from countless hours of practice in their garage. Robert had cleared out half the space 2 years ago, installing mirrors and mats so Sarah could train at home. Some evenings, he would find her there at sunset, moving through her forms with a focused intensity that reminded him painfully of Linda's approach to everything she cared about. As the competitors advanced through the brackets, Robert noticed a woman sitting alone in the 3rd row of bleachers. She had shoulder-length blonde hair and was wearing a navy blue sweater that looked expensive but understated. Unlike most tournament parents, she wasn't shouting encouragement or frantically taking pictures. Instead, she watched the competition with quiet attention, occasionally making notes in a small leather notebook. When Jennifer Walsh was announced for her kata performance, the woman's posture straightened slightly, and Robert realized this must be Jennifer's mother. She looked to be in her late 30s, with the kind of composed bearing that suggested she was accustomed to high-pressure situations. As Jennifer moved through her form with technical precision, her mother's expression remained neutral, but Robert caught the subtle way her hands relaxed when Jennifer completed a particularly difficult sequence. The semi-finals arrived faster than Robert had expected. Sarah faced a stocky boy from San Diego, whose aggressive style had overwhelmed 3 previous opponents. But Sarah had learned to use her opponent's aggression against them, a lesson that extended beyond karate into the careful navigation of teenage social dynamics and the daily challenges of growing Up without a mother, she won her semi-final match with a perfectly timed counter-attack, earning a spot in the championship round against Jennifer Walsh. As the competitors prepared for the final match, Robert found himself glancing again at the blonde woman in the third row. She had closed her notebook and was watching Sarah with what appeared to be professional interest rather than competitive concern. The final match would determine not just the tournament champion, but would also serve as a qualifying event for the regional championships in December. Robert knew how much this meant to Sarah, though she had never said it directly. Since Linda's death, their conversations had become careful dances around the deeper emotions that threatened to overwhelm them both. As the referee called the two girls to the center mat, Robert felt the familiar mixture of pride and anxiety that had defined his experience as a tournament parent. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the approaching 2-year anniversary of Linda's death, or maybe it was simply the recognition that Sarah was growing into the kind of young woman her mother had always hoped she would become. The tournament hall fell silent as the competitors bowed to each other and assumed their fighting stances. In that moment of suspended anticipation, Robert caught the eye of the blonde woman in the third row, and for just an instant, he saw in her expression the same mixture of hope and protective concern that he carried in his own heart. The referee's whistle pierced the silence as Sarah and Jennifer circled each other on the center mat. Robert's knuckles whitened against the bleacher rail, his engineering mind automatically calculating angles and distances, while his father's heart hammered against his ribs. The gymnasium had grown quieter, spectators leaning forward as the two most skilled competitors in the junior division prepared to clash. Jennifer struck first, with a lightning-fast reverse punch that Sarah barely deflected. The crowd murmured appreciation for the technical excellence of both the attack and defense. Robert had watched enough tournaments to recognize superior karate when he saw it, and both girls displayed the kind of precision that came from years of dedicated training under quality instruction. Sarah responded with a series of kicks that showcased the flexibility training Robert had helped her maintain at home. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after finishing her homework at the kitchen table, she would spend an hour stretching while he reviewed engineering blueprints nearby. It had become one of their quiet rituals, each focused on their own work, but sharing the comfortable silence that had replaced the dinner conversations they used to have as a family. The match continued, with neither competitor gaining a decisive advantage. Jennifer's technique was picture perfect, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next like a demonstration from a martial arts textbook. But Sarah fought with something deeper than technique, a fierce determination that had been forged in the months following her mother's funeral, when she had channeled her grief into physical training with an intensity that both worried and impressed Robert. From his peripheral vision, Robert caught sight of Jennifer's mother leaning forward slightly in her seat. Her composed demeanor remained intact, but her hands had moved to grip the edge of her notebook. She was clearly accustomed to watching high-level competition, probably having attended dozens of these tournaments over the years. Yet something about this particular match seemed to command her full attention. The first point came suddenly. Sarah feinted with a high kick, drawing Jennifer's guard upward, then swept low with a technique that caught her opponent off balance. The referee's hand shot up, signaling a point for Sarah. Half the crowd erupted in cheers, while the other half groaned in disappointment. Robert allowed himself a small smile, recognizing the combination they had practiced countless times in their garage dojo. Jennifer's response was immediate and technical. She adjusted her stance slightly and began pressuring Sarah with a series of precise hand techniques that demonstrated superior conditioning and speed. Robert could see his daughter beginning to tire, her movements becoming fractionally slower as the match wore on. Jennifer, meanwhile, seemed to possess the kind of cardiovascular conditioning that came from training at an elite-level dojo with professional-grade equipment. The second point went to Jennifer with a perfectly executed ridge hand strike that slipped past Sarah's defense like a blade through silk. The score was tied, and Robert could sense the shift in momentum. Jennifer had found her rhythm, and Sarah was struggling to match the pace that her technically superior opponent was setting. During the brief rest period between exchanges, Robert found his gaze drifting again to Jennifer's mother. She sat with perfect posture, her attention completely focused on the mat, but there was something in her expression that surprised him. Rather than the fierce partisan support he expected from a tournament parent, she seemed to be evaluating both competitors with equal interest. When Sarah executed a particularly smooth counterattack, Robert caught what looked almost like approval in the woman's subtle nod. The third and deciding point would determine the tournament champion. Both girls had settled into the focused intensity that separated serious martial artists from casual practitioners. Sarah's breathing was controlled despite her obvious fatigue, while Jennifer moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to pressure situations. The crowd had grown completely silent, understanding they were witnessing the kind of match that would be remembered and discussed for weeks. Jennifer launched a complex attack sequence that pushed Sarah steadily backward across the mat. But Sarah had learned something important in the 2 years since her mother's death. Sometimes the best defense was to absorb pressure while waiting for the precise moment to counter. Robert had seen this quality emerge gradually, not just in karate but in how she handled the social challenges of high school and the practical responsibilities that came with managing a household without Linda's organizational skills. The winning technique came from an unexpected angle. As Jennifer committed to what appeared to be a decisive forward strike, Sarah shifted slightly to the side and delivered a perfectly timed counterpunch that found its mark just as Jennifer's attack whistled past her ear. The referee's hand went up immediately, signaling the final point. The gymnasium erupted in applause as both competitors bowed respectfully to each other and then to the referee. Robert felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with watching his daughter handle both victory and the pressure of competition, with the grace that Linda had always emphasized was more important than any trophy. As Sarah received her gold medal, Robert noticed Jennifer's mother approaching the edge of the competition area. She moved with the confident bearing of someone comfortable in various social situations, and when she reached the mat, she offered her hand to Sarah in congratulation. The gesture struck Robert as remarkably gracious, particularly given that her own daughter had just lost a closely contested match. "Excellent technique," the woman said to Sarah, her voice carrying clearly in the post-match quiet. "That final counter was perfectly timed." Sarah accepted the compliment with the humility that Robert and Linda had tried to instill in her. "Thank you, ma'am. Jennifer pushed me to fight my best match." As the medal ceremony concluded and families began gathering their gear, Robert found himself walking toward the small group that included Sarah, Jennifer, and the blonde woman he now knew must be Jennifer's mother. Something about the gracious way she had handled her daughter's defeat impressed him, reminding him of the kind of person Linda had been, someone who found genuine pleasure in recognizing excellence regardless of which side of a competition it appeared on. The post-tournament atmosphere buzzed with the familiar mixture of celebration and disappointment as families packed gym bags and exchanged contact information for upcoming competitions. Robert gathered Sarah's equipment while she changed out of her GI in the makeshift locker room that had been set up in a classroom adjacent to the gymnasium. The gold medal hung around her neck, catching the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the windows. "Dad, I'm starving," Sarah announced as she emerged wearing jeans and a Riverside High School sweatshirt. Her hair was still damp with perspiration, and her cheeks flushed with the satisfaction of a hard-fought victory. "Can we stop at that diner on the way home?" Robert smiled, remembering how Linda used to insist on celebratory meals after every tournament, win or lose. The tradition had continued naturally after her death, becoming one of the ways father and daughter marked these shared milestones. "Of course, you earned it with that final technique." As they walked toward the exit, carrying Sarah's gear bag and trophy, Robert noticed Jennifer and her mother near the registration table. The woman was speaking quietly with the tournament director, her manner professional and efficient. Jennifer stood beside her, no longer wearing her gi but looking composed despite her second-place finish. There was something about both mother and daughter that suggested they were accustomed to handling competitive situations with grace. "Sarah, wait a moment," Robert said, making a decision that surprised him. He approached the registration table with Sarah following, her medal still catching the light. "Excuse me," he said to Jennifer's mother. "I wanted to thank you for what you said to Sarah after the match. That kind of sportsmanship means a lot." The woman turned toward them, and Robert got his first clear look at her face. She had intelligent blue eyes and the kind of understated elegance that came from confidence rather than artifice. "Not at all," she replied with a warm smile. "Your daughter fought beautifully. Jennifer has been competing for 3 years, and she rarely faces opponents with that kind of tactical awareness." "I'm Robert Chen," he said, extending his hand. "And this is Sarah." "Catherine Walsh," she responded, her handshake firm and brief. "And you've already met Jennifer." We drive down from Orange County for most of these tournaments. Sarah stepped forward slightly, addressing Jennifer directly. You almost had me with that combination in the second exchange. I've never faced anyone that fast. Jennifer's response revealed the kind of mature perspective that impressed Robert. My sensei always says you learn more from close matches than easy victories. You made me work harder than I have all season. As the four of them talked, Robert found himself studying Catherine Walsh with the same analytical approach he applied to engineering problems. She wore a wedding ring, but something in her manner suggested she was managing Jennifer's tournament schedule independently. Her clothes were expensive but practical, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions without consultation. Are you planning to compete in the regional championships? Catherine asked Sarah. They're being held in San Diego this December, and based on today's performance, you should definitely qualify. Sarah glanced at Robert before answering. The regionals represented a significant commitment, travel expenses, hotel costs, and competition fees that would strain their careful budget. Since Linda's death, Robert had managed their finances with the same methodical precision he applied to engineering calculations. But discretionary spending required careful consideration. We hadn't discussed it yet, Robert replied honestly. Today was about seeing how Sarah would handle this level of competition. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. The regional tournament attracts competitors from 5 states. It's quite an experience, regardless of how the competition goes. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Jennifer has qualified for the last 2 years. Perhaps our daughters could train together sometime before the regionals. My dojo has excellent facilities, and Jennifer could benefit from working with someone who challenges her tactical approach. The suggestion surprised Robert, both for its generosity and its implied recognition of Sarah's potential. Most tournament parents focused exclusively on their own children's advancement, viewing other competitors as obstacles rather than training partners. Catherine's offer suggested a more collaborative approach to martial arts development. That's very generous, Robert said. Sarah trains at a small dojo here in Riverside, but additional practice with quality partners is always valuable. I'd like that, Sarah said, her enthusiasm evident. I mean, if it's okay with Dad, and if Jennifer wants to. I think it could help both of them, Jennifer replied, glancing at her mother for confirmation, especially working on timing against different fighting styles. As they exchanged contact information, Robert noticed other families beginning to leave the community center. The afternoon was advancing, and the tournament organizers were breaking down the registration tables and stacking folding chairs along the walls. Soon, the gymnasium would return to its normal function as a community gathering space, showing no trace of the morning's intense competition. We should probably head out, Catherine said, checking a gold watch that looked like it had been expensive when purchased. Jennifer has homework, and it's a long drive back to Orange County. Of course, Robert replied. Thank you again for the invitation. We'll be in touch about training together. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sarah bouncing slightly with post-competition energy, Robert found himself thinking about Catherine Walsh in ways that both surprised and concerned him. It had been 2 years since Linda's death, and he had carefully avoided any situation that might complicate his focus on raising Sarah. Yet something about Catherine's combination of intelligence, grace and genuine interest in her daughter's development reminded him of qualities he had valued in Linda. She seems nice, Sarah said as they loaded her gear into their Honda Civic. And Jennifer is really good. Training with her could help me get ready for regionals. We'll see about the regionals, Robert replied, starting the engine. But you're right about Jennifer. She's an excellent martial artist. As they drove toward the diner where they would celebrate Sarah's victory, Robert found himself replaying the brief conversation with Catherine Walsh. Her offer to let Sarah train at Jennifer's dojo was unexpectedly generous, suggesting either exceptional sportsmanship or genuine interest in helping both girls improve. Either way, it represented an opportunity that deserved serious consideration. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban streets as they headed home, Sarah's gold medal resting on the dashboard between them like a small beacon of possibility. 3 days passed before Robert found the courage to call the phone number Catherine Walsh had written on the back of a tournament program. He had carried the piece of paper in his shirt pocket since Saturday, pulling it out periodically to study the neat handwriting while debating whether Sarah's karate development justified what felt like a significant personal risk. Wednesday evening found him in the kitchen, ostensibly reviewing blueprints for a water treatment facility while Sarah completed her algebra homework at the dining room table. The wall-mounted phone hung within easy reach, its beige plastic surface worn smooth from 2 years of single-parent conversations with teachers, coaches, and the various service professionals who helped maintain their orderly but simplified household. "Dad, you've been staring at that same drawing for 20 minutes, Sarah observed without looking up from her textbook. "Is everything okay with the project?" Robert set down his pencil and rubbed his eyes. At 42, he still felt capable of handling the technical challenges of civil engineering, but the personal navigation required for raising a teenage daughter often seemed more complex than designing bridge supports or calculating water pressure coefficients. "Just thinking about your training schedule," he replied honestly. "Mrs. Walsh's offer to let you work out at Jennifer's dojo could be valuable preparation for regionals." Sarah closed her algebra book and turned to face him fully. Over the past 2 years, she had developed an intuitive understanding of his hesitations that sometimes surprised him with its accuracy. "You're worried about something else, aren't you?" "Not worried exactly," Robert said, appreciating her directness, while wondering how much of his internal debate was appropriate to share. "I just want to make sure any changes we make are good for both of us." "Because of Mom?" The question hung in the kitchen air like smoke from a forgotten cigarette. They rarely addressed Linda's death directly, having developed an unspoken understanding that grief was something to be managed through routine and forward motion rather than extensive analysis. But Sarah's tournament victory had created a small crack in their careful emotional maintenance, allowing broader questions to surface. "Your mother would want you to have every opportunity to succeed," Robert said carefully. "She would also want us to be thoughtful about the decisions we make." Sarah nodded, accepting the diplomatic response while clearly understanding its deeper implications. "Maybe you should just call and ask about the training schedule. You don't have to decide everything right now." Her practical suggestion reminded Robert why he was consistently proud of his daughter's developing maturity. She had learned to approach complicated situations with the same methodical patience that he applied to engineering problems, breaking complex issues into manageable components rather than becoming overwhelmed by their totality. Robert reached for the phone before he could reconsider. Catherine answered on the third ring, her voice professional but warm in the way that suggested she had been expecting his call. "Mr. Chen, I'm glad you decided to contact me. Have you and Sarah discussed the training opportunity?" "We have," Robert replied, settling into the familiar rhythm of practical conversation. "Sarah is very interested, and I think it could benefit her preparation for regionals. I wanted to ask about the logistics. Of course, our dojo is in Irvine, about an hour drive from Riverside depending on traffic. Jennifer typically trains Tuesday and Thursday evenings, plus Saturday mornings. Sarah would be welcome to join any of those sessions." Robert calculated distances and drive times automatically, his engineer's mind processing the practical requirements, while another part of his consciousness registered the pleasant quality of Catherine's voice. She spoke with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to organizing complex schedules, yet without the rushed quality that often characterized suburban parents juggling multiple commitments. "Tuesday and Thursday would work well with Sarah's school schedule," he said. "Saturday mornings might conflict with her part-time job at the library." "Jennifer works at a bookstore on Saturday afternoons," Catherine replied. "The morning training sessions are usually shorter, focused on technique refinement rather than full workouts." As they discussed training schedules and dojo policies, Robert found himself drawn into a conversation that extended beyond the immediate logistics. Catherine asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's tournament experience and training background, demonstrating genuine interest in his daughter's martial arts development rather than merely offering polite accommodation. "I should mention that I sometimes stay to watch the training sessions," Catherine said. "The dojo has a small observation area with chairs for parents. You're welcome to wait there, or there's a coffee shop next door if you prefer." The image of sitting in a dojo observation area, watching their daughters train together while making small conversation with Catherine Walsh, created an unexpected flutter of anticipation in Robert's chest. He had carefully avoided situations that might lead to personal connections with other single parents, recognizing that his emotional energy needed to remain focused on Sarah's needs. "I appreciate that option," he said. "It would depend on traffic and my work schedule, but I'd like to observe Sarah's training when possible." "Excellent. Should we plan on this coming Tuesday for Sarah's first session?" Jennifer is working on combinations for regionals, so the timing would be perfect. After confirming the details and ending the call, Robert remained in the kitchen, staring at the phone while processing the mixture of practical satisfaction and personal uncertainty that the conversation had generated. He had successfully arranged additional training opportunities for Sarah, addressing her competitive needs in a straightforward manner. Yet he could not ignore the fact that he was looking forward to seeing Catherine Walsh again, with an anticipation that had nothing to do with karate. "So we're going to Orange County on Tuesday?" Sarah asked from the dining room, where she had clearly been listening to his side of the conversation. "If you want to," Robert replied. "Mrs. Walsh seems to think the training would benefit both you and Jennifer. And you get to see her again." The observation was delivered without judgment, simply stated as a fact that Sarah had recognized and accepted. Robert turned to face his daughter, seeing in her expression the same combination of understanding and protective concern that he carried regarding her own social development. "Is that okay with you?" he asked. "Mum would want you to be happy," Sarah said, with the kind of wisdom that continued to surprise him. "And Mrs. Walsh seems nice. Besides, I really want to train with Jennifer." That evening, as Robert reviewed his work schedule to ensure he could leave the office early on Tuesday, he reflected on how a karate tournament had led to possibilities he had not allowed himself to consider for 2 years. The practical benefits for Sarah's training were clear and sufficient justification for the arrangement. Everything else would need to develop naturally, without pressure or predetermined expectations. The phone number was no longer in his shirt pocket, having been transferred to the small address book that Linda had started and he had continued maintaining. Under the W section, Catherine Walsh's information now held a permanent place in there. Carefully organized household records. Tuesday. Evening traffic on the 91 freeway moved with the predictable sluggishness that defined Southern California commuting in 1987. Robert gripped the steering wheel of their Honda Civic while Sarah reviewed her tournament notes in the passenger seat, both of them making the adjustment from their familiar Riverside routine to this new adventure in Orange County. "Take the next exit," Sarah said, consulting the hand-drawn map Catherine had provided over the phone. The dojo should be in a strip mall on the right side of the street. Robert had left work 30 minutes early to ensure they would arrive on time. Explaining to his project supervisor that Sarah had an important training session, the lie of omission felt necessary. He was not ready to explain that his daughter's karate development had led to his first social interaction with an interesting woman since Linda's death. The dojo occupied a storefront, between a dry cleaner and a Chinese restaurant, its large windows revealing a spacious training area with mirrors covering 2 walls. A small sign in elegant script announced Traditional Karate Academy, and through the glass, Robert could see students in white gis practicing basic techniques under the guidance of an elderly Japanese instructor. "It's bigger than our dojo," Sarah observed as they parked the Honda next to a silver Mercedes sedan that Robert suspected belonged to Catherine. "And look at those heavy bags. Sensei Martinez has been wanting to get equipment like that for months." They entered through a glass door that chimed softly, stepping into a reception area that smelled of floor wax and the faint trace of incense. The walls displayed photographs of tournament champions and certificates of achievement, creating an atmosphere of serious dedication to martial arts excellence. Behind a small desk, a teenage boy in a brown belt was organizing registration paperwork. "You must be Sarah Chen," came Catherine's voice from the observation area. She approached them wearing dark slacks and a cream-colored blouse that looked appropriate for either a business meeting or a casual evening out. "Jennifer is already warming up. Mr. Chen, I'm glad you could make it." Robert shook her offered hand, noting again the confident grip and direct eye contact that had impressed him at the tournament. "Thank you for arranging this. Sarah has been looking forward to training with Jennifer all week. The feeling is mutual. Jennifer rarely gets to work with someone who challenges her tactical approach." Catherine gestured toward the training area, where Jennifer was stretching near the mirrors, her movements displaying the fluid flexibility that had made her such a formidable tournament competitor. Sarah needed no encouragement to join the warm-up routine, changing quickly in a small locker room before emerging in her own GI. Robert watched his daughter integrate seamlessly into the training session, matching Jennifer's pace through a series of stretching exercises that prepared both girls for the intensive workout ahead. "Coffee?" Catherine asked, indicating a small machine in the observation area. "I usually stay for the full session. The drive back to Orange County gives Jennifer and me time to discuss what she learned." Robert accepted the offer, settling into one of the folding chairs that lined the observation area. Through the large windows, he could see the main training floor, where Sensei Nakamura, a compact man in his 60s, was beginning the evening's instruction with a group of adult students. Sarah and Jennifer worked in a separate area under the guidance of a senior student. Their session focused on the specific techniques that would be most relevant for regional competition. "How long has Jennifer been training here?" Robert asked, genuinely curious about the trajectory that had produced such a skilled young martial artist. 3 years, Catherine replied, settling into the chair beside him with her own cup of coffee. "We started looking for activities after her father and I divorced. Jennifer needed something that would build confidence and provide structure." The admission surprised Robert with its directness. Most conversations with other parents involved careful navigation around personal circumstances, particularly topics as sensitive as divorce or death. Catherine's willingness to share this information suggested either exceptional openness or a deliberate decision to establish honest communication from the beginning. "Sarah started training after my wife died," Robert found himself saying. "The discipline has been good for both of us." Catherine nodded with understanding that seemed genuine rather than merely polite. "Grief changes everything, doesn't it? Jennifer and I had to rebuild our entire routine after the divorce. Karate became one of the constants we could count on." They watched their daughters work through a series of combination techniques, Jennifer's precision complementing Sarah's tactical creativity in ways that benefited both competitors. Sensei Nakamura occasionally paused to offer corrections or suggestions, his instruction delivered in the patient manner that characterized experienced teachers. "He's impressive," Robert observed, watching the elderly instructor demonstrate a complex technique with movements that flowed like water despite his age. Sensei Nakamura competed internationally in the 1960s, Catherine explained. "He opened this dojo when he retired from competition, and most of the serious tournament fighters in Orange County have trained with him at some point." As the training session progressed, Robert found himself relaxing into conversation with Catherine in ways that surprised him. She asked intelligent questions about his engineering work, expressing genuine interest in the technical challenges of designing municipal infrastructure. Her own background, he learned, involved marketing for a software company that was beginning to recognize the commercial potential of personal computers. "The technology is advancing so quickly," she said. "Jennifer uses our home computer for school reports, and I'm amazed by what these machines can accomplish compared to just 5 years ago." Robert nodded, remembering the massive mainframe computers he had worked with in college and contrasting them with the desktop units that were beginning to appear in some engineering offices. "The processing power is incredible, but I wonder about the practical applications for most families." "Jennifer's school is starting to offer computer programming classes," Catherine replied. "She's considering it as an elective next year, along with advanced mathematics." The conversation revealed Jennifer as a serious student with interests that extended well beyond karate, much like Sarah's combination of martial arts dedication and academic achievement. Both girls seemed to approach their various commitments with the kind of focused intensity that their single parents had learned to recognize and support. As the training session concluded, Sarah and Jennifer bowed respectfully to their instructor and to each other, their faces flushed with the satisfaction of intensive practice. They had pushed each other to higher levels of performance, exactly as Catherine had predicted when she first suggested the arrangement. "How was it?" Robert asked as Sarah gathered her gear. "Amazing," Sarah replied, her enthusiasm evident. "Jennifer showed me this counter technique that I've never seen before, and Sensei Nakamura said my timing has improved since the tournament." "Same time Thursday?" Catherine asked, addressing both Robert and Sarah. "Definitely," Sarah answered before Robert could respond, then looked at her father for confirmation. "If that works with your schedule, Dad." Robert glanced at Catherine, seeing in her expression the same mixture of parental satisfaction and personal anticipation that he was feeling. "Thursday works fine," he said. "We'll see you then." As they drove home through the darkening evening, Sarah chattering excitedly about the training session and the new techniques she had learned, Robert reflected on how naturally the evening had developed. The practical benefits for Sarah's karate were clear and significant. Everything else remained undefined but full of possibility. Thursday's training session established a pattern that quickly became integral to their weekly routine. Robert found himself leaving work with increasing anticipation, not just for Sarah's martial arts development, but for the hour of adult conversation that had become a highlight of his carefully structured life. Catherine was intelligent, direct and refreshingly honest about the challenges of single parenthood in ways that made their discussions feel both comfortable and meaningful. Jennifer mentioned that Sarah is considering advanced placement classes next year, Catherine said, as they watched their daughters work through sparring combinations under Sensei Nakamura's watchful guidance. That's quite an academic commitment alongside tournament training. Robert nodded, stirring his coffee while observing Sarah's improved footwork. 2 weeks of training with Jennifer had sharpened his daughter's techniques in ways that impressed him. She's always been academically focused, like her mother. Linda was a teacher before Sarah was born. What did she teach? High school mathematics. She had planned to return to teaching once Sarah started college. The admission came easily, surprising Robert with how natural it felt to share these details about Linda with Catherine. For 2 years, he had carefully avoided discussions that might lead to deeper personal revelations. She would be proud of Sarah, Catherine observed, watching as Sarah executed a particularly smooth counterattack against Jennifer's offensive sequence, both academically and in karate. It's clear that she's been raised with excellent values. The compliment touched something deep in Robert's chest, addressing fears he rarely acknowledged about whether he was providing adequate guidance for his daughter's development. Single parenthood had required him to navigate unfamiliar territory without the benefit of Linda's intuitive understanding of teenage social dynamics and emotional needs. Jennifer seems equally well-grounded, Robert replied. Divorce must have been challenging, but you've clearly maintained stability for her. Catherine's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, suggesting that the topic still carried emotional weight despite the practical tone of their conversation. The first year was difficult. Jennifer's father moved to Seattle for a new job, so she only sees him during summer vacation and major holidays. We had to create new traditions and routines. How long ago? 4 years. Jennifer was 11 when it became final. Catherine paused, watching her daughter demonstrate a complex technique to Sarah. She handled it better than I expected, actually. Children are often more resilient than we give them credit for. Robert understood the underlying message. Both of their daughters had navigated major family disruptions with remarkable grace, finding stability through discipline and routine, rather than becoming overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. Karate had provided structure during periods when everything else seemed uncertain. As November approached, the regional championship tournament began dominating their conversations. Both girls had qualified easily, and the competition in San Diego promised to attract the strongest junior competitors from across the southwestern United States. The stakes were higher than anything either Sarah or Jennifer had previously experienced. The tournament entry fees are substantial, Robert mentioned one Thursday evening as they prepared to leave the dojo. But Sarah has earned the opportunity to compete at this level. I've been thinking about logistics, Catherine said, gathering her purse and car keys. The tournament runs from Friday through Sunday, which means hotel expenses on top of everything else. Perhaps we could share accommodations to reduce costs for both families. The suggestion made practical sense, yet Robert felt his pulse quicken at the implications. 3 days in San Diego with Catherine and Jennifer represented a significant escalation in their developing relationship, moving beyond the controlled environment of dojo observation into uncharted territory of shared meals and extended time together. That could work, he said carefully. Sarah would probably enjoy having Jennifer as a roommate for the weekend. I was thinking more along the lines of a suite with separate bedrooms, Catherine clarified, her tone maintaining the practical efficiency that characterized most of their discussions. The girls could share one room while we take the other. It would be more economical than separate accommodations. Robert's engineering mind appreciated the logical approach, while his emotional instincts recognized the potential complications. Sharing a hotel suite with Catherine Walsh would create intimacy that extended far beyond their current weekly conversations in the dojo observation area. Yet the practical benefits were undeniable, and Sarah's competitive needs provided justification for decisions that might otherwise seem premature. Let me discuss it with Sarah, he said. If she's comfortable with the arrangement, it sounds like an excellent solution. That evening, as they drove home through familiar riverside streets, Robert broached the subject with his daughter. Her response revealed the same combination of practical wisdom and emotional insight that continued to impress him. Mrs. Walsh is nice, And it would be fun to room with Jennifer, Sarah said after considering the proposal. Besides, Dad, you've seemed happier since we started training there. Have I? You smile more. And you don't spend as much time staring at Mum's picture after dinner. The observation struck Robert as both perceptive and slightly unsettling. He had not realized that his emotional state was so transparent to his daughter, nor that she had been monitoring his evening routines with such careful attention. Yet her acceptance of Catherine's presence in their lives suggested that she viewed the developing relationship as beneficial rather than threatening. You okay with Mrs. Walsh and me spending more time together? As long as you don't try to replace Mom, Sarah said with the directness that had characterized their most important conversations. But Mom wouldn't want you to be alone forever, and Mrs. Walsh isn't trying to be something she's not. Friday afternoon, Robert called Catherine to confirm their shared accommodation plans for the regional tournament. Their conversation covered practical details like check-in procedures and driving arrangements, but underneath the logistical discussion lay an unspoken acknowledgement that their relationship was evolving into something neither had explicitly defined. I'm looking forward to it, Catherine said as their conversation concluded. Both the tournament and the weekend. So am I, Robert admitted, recognizing that his anticipation extended far beyond watching Sarah compete at the regional level. As he hung up the phone, Robert reflected on how a chance encounter at a local karate tournament had led to possibilities he had not allowed himself to consider since Linda's death. The practical benefits remained clear and justifiable, but increasingly he recognized that something deeper was developing between Catherine Walsh and himself, something that deserved honest exploration. Despite the risks it represented, the regional tournament was still 3 weeks away, but Robert found himself counting the days with an anticipation that had nothing to do with karate and everything to do with the prospect of spending an entire weekend with a woman who had somehow slipped past his carefully maintained emotional defenses. The Friday morning of the regional championship dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of California winter sunshine that made long drives seem like adventures rather than obligations. Robert loaded their Honda Civic with tournament gear, overnight bags, and the cooler of sandwiches that Sarah had insisted on preparing the night before. The methodical packing reminded him of family trips with Linda, but the anticipation he felt was entirely different, tinged with nervous excitement about spending an extended weekend with Catherine Walsh. Did you remember your mouthguard? Sarah asked, double-checking her gear bag with the same systematic thoroughness that Robert applied to engineering projects. And the backup G in case something tears? Everything's packed, Robert assured her, though he found himself mentally reviewing his own preparations. He had selected his weekend clothes with unusual care, choosing casual outfits that were neither too formal nor too relaxed for the ambiguous social situation they were entering. The hotel reservation confirmation lay folded in his wallet, a tangible reminder that this weekend represented uncharted territory. They were meeting Catherine and Jennifer at a gas station in Mission Viejo, the halfway point between their respective homes. As Robert pulled into the service station parking lot, he spotted Catherine's silver Mercedes sedan near the convenience store, Jennifer visible through the passenger window organizing her own tournament materials. There they are, Sarah announced, waving enthusiastically at Jennifer before they had even parked. The two girls had developed a genuine friendship over the past month of shared training, their mutual respect extending beyond martial arts into homework, help and teenage confidences that Robert occasionally overheard during their phone conversations. Catherine emerged from her car, wearing dark jeans and a navy sweater that looked both comfortable and stylish. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried herself with the confident efficiency that Robert had come to associate with her approach to most situations. Yet he caught something in her expression that suggested she was experiencing her own version of nervous anticipation. "Good morning," she said, approaching them with a warm smile. "Perfect weather for the drive. Jennifer barely slept last night. She's been awake since 5:30 reviewing her kata sequences." "Sarah was up early too," Robert replied, shaking Catherine's offered hand and noting how natural the brief physical contact felt. She reorganized her gear bag twice before breakfast. The girls gravitated toward each other immediately, comparing notes about their preparation routines and discussing the competition they expected to face at regionals. Both had studied tournament results from previous years, analyzing the techniques and strategies that had proven successful at this elevated level of competition. "Should we take one car or drive separately?" Catherine asked, addressing the practical question that would determine how they spent the next 3 hours together. Robert had considered this decision extensively, recognizing that sharing a car would create enforced intimacy, while separate vehicles would allow them to maintain their established boundaries. Sarah's enthusiastic endorsement of riding with Jennifer made the choice for him. "One car makes sense," he said. "Better for the environment, and the girls can strategize together during the drive." They transferred their luggage to the Mercedes, which offered more spacious accommodations than Robert's Honda. Catherine's car smelled faintly of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that reminded Robert of flowers without being overpowering. The interior was immaculate, suggesting the same attention to detail that characterized her approach to Jennifer's tournament preparation. "I made a playlist for the drive," Jennifer announced as they settled into their seats, Sarah beside her in the back, while Robert took the passenger seat next to Catherine. "Nothing too energetic that might make us nervous, but upbeat enough to keep us motivated." The music selection revealed Jennifer's thoughtful personality, mix of current pop songs and classic rock that provided background ambiance without demanding attention. As Catherine guided the Mercedes onto Interstate 5 southbound, Robert found himself relaxing into the passenger seat while engaging in the kind of easy conversation that had become natural during their weekly dojo sessions. "Have you been to San Diego recently?" Catherine asked as they passed through the rolling hills of Orange County. "Not for several years," Robert replied. "Linda and I used to take Sarah to the zoo when she was younger, but work and tournament schedules haven't allowed much leisure travel lately. We should plan some sightseeing if the tournament schedule permits," Catherine suggested. "The girls might enjoy Balboa Park, and there are some excellent restaurants near the harbour." The casual mention of shared activities beyond the tournament created a flutter of anticipation in Robert's chest. He had carefully avoided making assumptions about how they would spend their non-competition time, but Catherine's suggestion indicated she was thinking beyond the immediate practical necessities. During the 2-hour drive, their conversation ranged across topics that revealed increasing compatibility. Catherine's marketing background had given her insights into business trends that intersected interestingly with Robert's infrastructure engineering perspective. They discovered mutual interests in classical music and historical biographies, shared concerns about their daughter's college preparation, and similar approaches to balancing career demands with parental responsibilities. "Jennifer wants to study computer science," Catherine mentioned as they passed through the coastal communities north of San Diego. "She's convinced that technology careers will offer more opportunities for women than traditional fields." "She's probably right," Robert agreed. "Sarah is leaning toward engineering, but I've encouraged her to consider all her options. The professional landscape is changing rapidly." In the back seat, their daughters had moved beyond tournament discussion into the broader territory of teenage friendship. Robert overheard Sarah explaining her college application strategy, while Jennifer shared her thoughts about boys, social dynamics, and the challenges of maintaining academic excellence alongside athletic commitments. Their easy rapport reminded him of the friendship Sarah had lost when her best friend's family moved to Phoenix the previous year. The San Diego skyline appeared gradually as they crested the final hills before descending toward the coast. The tournament hotel was located in Mission Valley, a modern facility that catered to sporting events and business conferences with equal efficiency. As Catherine navigated the parking garage, Robert felt his anticipation shifting from nervous uncertainty to genuine excitement about the weekend ahead. "Room 847, Catherine announced, consulting their confirmation paperwork as they gathered their luggage from the trunk. 2 bedrooms with a shared living area, just as we discussed. The elevator ride to the 8th floor passed in comfortable silence, each family member processing their own expectations for the weekend. Sarah and Jennifer chatted quietly about their competition schedule, while Robert and Catherine exchanged glances that acknowledged the significance of this shared accommodation without requiring explicit discussion. The suite exceeded Robert's expectations, offering spacious bedrooms separated by a well-appointed living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the hotel's pool and the distant Pacific Ocean. The arrangement provided privacy while encouraging the kind of casual interaction that would allow their relationships to develop. "Naturally, this is perfect," Sarah announced, claiming the bed nearest the window in the room she would share with Jennifer. "We can see the ocean from here." As they unpacked and settled into their temporary living arrangement, Robert reflected on how smoothly the transition had occurred. The practical logistics of shared accommodation had been managed efficiently, but the emotional implications were still unfolding. For the first time since Linda's death, he was sharing living space with a woman who interested him as more than a casual acquaintance. The tournament would begin the following morning, but Robert found himself hoping that the competition would provide opportunities to explore the developing connection between Catherine and himself. 3 days in San Diego represented a chance to move beyond their carefully controlled weekly interactions into something deeper and more substantial. Saturday morning arrived with the characteristic tension that preceded major competitions. Robert woke before his alarm, hearing quiet voices from the adjacent room where Sarah and Jennifer were already reviewing their kata sequences. Through the hotel suite's living area windows, the San Diego sunrise painted the distant ocean in shades of gold and pink, creating a deceptively peaceful backdrop for what promised to be an intense day of competition. Catherine emerged from the bathroom wearing a burgundy sweater and dark slacks, her hair styled with the kind of understated elegance that required careful attention while appearing effortless. She moved with quiet efficiency, preparing coffee in the suite's small kitchenette while organizing the tournament paperwork they would need for registration. "The girls have been up since 6, she said softly, handing Robert a cup of coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. Jennifer barely touched her breakfast, which is typical for major tournaments. "How does Sarah usually handle pre-competition nerves?" "She gets very focused," Robert replied, accepting the coffee gratefully while watching his daughter through the bedroom doorway. Sarah was moving through her warm-up routine with methodical precision. Each stretch held for exactly the count that Sensei Martinez had prescribed. "Sometimes I think the preparation ritual is as important as the actual training." The tournament venue was the San Diego Convention Center, a massive facility that could accommodate the hundreds of competitors who had qualified from across the southwestern United States. As they joined the stream of families carrying gear bags and wearing team jackets, Robert felt the familiar mixture of pride and anxiety that accompanied Sarah's major competitions, amplified by the knowledge that this represented her highest level of competition to date. "Lane assignments are posted over there," Catherine observed, consulting the tournament program while navigating through the crowd of competitors and coaches. "Sarah is in Pool C for kata, Jennifer in Pool B. They won't face each other until the elimination rounds." The registration process consumed nearly an hour, requiring medical clearances, weight certifications, and gear inspections that ensured all competitors met the strict safety standards mandated for regional-level tournaments. Sarah submitted to the procedures with patient compliance, though Robert could see the controlled tension in her shoulders that indicated mounting competitive pressure. "First call for junior kata, Pool A," announced the public address system, its metallic voice echoing through the cavernous convention center. The preliminary rounds would determine seeding for the afternoon elimination brackets, making each performance crucial for advancement to the championship divisions. Robert and Catherine found seats in the spectator area, overlooking the kata competition mats, joining dozens of other parents who had traveled hundreds of miles to watch their children compete at this elite level. The atmosphere was notably more intense than local tournaments, with competitors warming up under the guidance of high-level instructors and referees, whose credentials included national and international competition experience. "Sarah's pool is third up," Catherine noted, timing the progression of events while keeping one eye on Jennifer's preparation routine near the warm-up area. Jennifer tends to perform better when she's had time to observe other competitors, so the later start time should benefit both girls. As Pool A commenced, Robert studied the quality of competition with growing appreciation for the challenge Sarah would face. These were not recreational martial artists, but dedicated tournament competitors whose technical excellence and competitive experience far exceeded anything she had previously encountered. The precision and power displayed in even the preliminary rounds was remarkable. "The level is extraordinary," Robert murmured, watching a competitor from Arizona execute a kata with museum-quality technical perfection. "Sarah has improved dramatically over the past month, but this is a significant step up in competition." "She belongs here," Catherine replied with quiet confidence. "Jennifer has competed at regionals twice, and Sarah's tactical awareness is superior to most of the girls I've watched at this level. Technical perfection can be learned, but competitive intelligence is more difficult to develop." Pool C was announced 40 minutes later. Robert watched Sarah approach the competition area with the controlled composure that had become her trademark. Her movements deliberate and focused despite the elevated pressure. She had selected Kanku Dai for her kata performance, a complex form that would showcase her technical development while allowing her to demonstrate the flowing power that distinguished her from purely technical competitors. The performance unfolded with remarkable precision. Sarah moved through the kata's demanding sequences with confidence that reflected months of intensive preparation. Her techniques sharp and controlled while maintaining the fluid transitions that gave her style its distinctive character. Robert found himself holding his breath during the more challenging passages, then releasing it slowly as she completed each section without error. "Excellent," Catherine breathed, as Sarah completed her final bow to the judging panel. She looked completely in control. Throughout the entire performance, the scoring was announced within minutes: 8.7, 8.8, 8.6, 8.9, 8.7. Sarah's average of 8.74 placed her third in her pool, securing advancement to the afternoon elimination rounds with a favorable seeding. As she left the competition area, her expression revealed satisfaction, tempered by awareness that the real challenge lay ahead. Jennifer's performance in Pool B was technically flawless, her movements displaying the museum-quality precision that had made her a consistent tournament champion. She scored 9.1 average, earning the top seed in her pool and positioning herself as one of the favorites for the championship division. Yet Robert noticed that her performance, while technically superior to Sarah's, lacked some of the tactical creativity that made his daughter's karate so compelling to watch. Both girls advanced with strong positions, Catherine observed, as they gathered for lunch between sessions. The afternoon brackets will be much more challenging, but they've earned the right to compete against the region's best. Lunch was a subdued affair in the convention center cafeteria. Both families focused on the afternoon competition while trying to maintain the casual atmosphere that would keep the girls relaxed. Sarah and Jennifer sat together, discussing the technical aspects of their morning performances while carefully avoiding speculation about potential afternoon matchups. "How are you feeling about this afternoon?" Robert asked Sarah as they finished eating. "Ready," she replied simply, her tone carrying the quiet confidence that had developed over months of intensive preparation. "I know I belong here now. This morning proved that." As they prepared to return to the competition area for the elimination rounds, Robert reflected on how the morning had exceeded his expectations in multiple ways. Sarah had demonstrated that she could compete successfully at the regional level, while Catherine had proven to be an ideal tournament companion, supportive without being intrusive, knowledgeable about competition dynamics, and genuinely invested in both girls' success rather than focus solely on Jennifer's advancement. The afternoon would determine whether either daughter would advance to the championship finals, but Robert realized that the weekend had already succeeded in ways that extended far beyond tournament results. The shared experience of high-level competition had deepened his appreciation for Catherine's character while confirming that Sarah was ready for this elevated level of martial arts challenge. As they walked back toward the competition mats, Catherine's hand brushed his briefly, a touch so fleeting it might have been accidental. Yet the small contact sent an electric pulse through Robert's awareness, reminding him that this weekend was developing into something significantly more meaningful than a shared tournament experience. The elimination rounds had been brutal, but exhilarating. Sarah advanced to the semi-finals before falling to a technically superior competitor from Phoenix, while Jennifer reached the championship match only to lose by the narrowest of margins to a girl from Las Vegas whose performance was nothing short of spectacular. Both daughters had competed with honor and skill that exceeded their previous achievements, earning respect from competitors and coaches throughout the convention center. By evening, the tournament families had dispersed to various restaurants around Mission Valley, creating a more relaxed atmosphere than the morning's intense competition environment. Robert and Catherine had chosen a quiet Italian restaurant within walking distance of their hotel, allowing Sarah and Jennifer to decompress from their competitive efforts while providing an opportunity for the adults to process the day's events. "I'm proud of both girls," Catherine said as they waited for their dinner orders. The candlelit restaurant providing intimate ambiance that contrasted sharply with the convention center's fluorescent intensity. "Semi-finals and championship match at their first regional tournament is remarkable achievement." Robert nodded, watching Sarah and Jennifer at the adjacent table where they were analyzing their performances with the detailed attention of serious athletes. Both girls had handled their defeats with the grace that distinguished mature competitors, focusing on what they had learned rather than dwelling on disappointing outcomes. "Sarah exceeded my expectations completely," he admitted. "6 months ago, I wouldn't have predicted she could compete at this level. The training with Jennifer made all the difference." "The improvement has been mutual," Catherine replied. "Jennifer's tactical awareness has developed significantly since they started working together. Your daughter has a gift for reading opponents that can't be taught through conventional instruction." Their conversation flowed naturally from tournament analysis into broader topics that revealed increasing personal compatibility. Catherine's marketing career had given her insights into corporate culture that paralleled Robert's experiences in engineering consulting, while their approaches to single parenthood reflected similar values despite different circumstances. "The hardest part isn't the practical logistics," Catherine said, swirling wine in her glass while choosing her words carefully. "It's maintaining confidence in your decisions when there's no one to provide validation or alternative perspectives." "Exactly," Robert agreed, appreciating her articulation of feelings he had struggled to express. "Every parenting choice feels magnified when you're making it alone. I constantly question whether I'm providing adequate guidance for Sarah's social development." "You're doing excellently. Sarah is one of the most well-adjusted teenagers I've encountered, and that's entirely due to your consistent support and clear expectations." The compliment touched Robert deeply, addressing insecurities that had plagued him throughout the 2 years since Linda's death. Raising a daughter without female guidance had required him to navigate unfamiliar territory, and Catherine's professional assessment carried weight that he found both reassuring and attractive. As dinner concluded and they prepared to return to the hotel, the evening air was cool and pleasant, encouraging them to walk slowly through the landscaped pathways that connected the restaurant district to their accommodation. Sarah and Jennifer had moved ahead, chattering about their plans for the following day's final competition rounds, leaving the adults to follow at a more contemplative pace. "Thank you for suggesting this arrangement," Robert said as they paused near a fountain that sparkled with underwater lighting. "The weekend has been beneficial for Sarah in ways that extend beyond tournament results." "I've enjoyed it as well," Catherine replied, her voice carrying undertones that suggested she was referring to more than their daughter's karate development. "It's been refreshing to spend time with someone who understands the challenges of competitive parenting." They had stopped walking, facing each other beside the illuminated fountain, while their daughters' voices faded into the distance. The moment felt charged with possibility, suspended between the careful friendship they had maintained and the deeper connection that had been developing throughout their weeks of shared time at the dojo. "Catherine," Robert began, then paused, uncertain how to articulate feelings that had been building gradually, but had crystallized during the intensity of the tournament weekend. "I want you to know that these past weeks have meant a great deal to me, more than just Sarah's training." "I know," she replied softly, her expression revealing that she had been experiencing her own version of the same emotional development. "I hadn't expected to meet someone who would interest me in this way. The timing feels complicated." "Because of the girls?" "Partly, but also because I'm not sure I'm ready for the kind of relationship this might become." Her honesty was characteristic, addressing the situation directly rather than allowing ambiguity to create confusion. "Jennifer and I have built a stable life over the past 4 years. Adding another person to that equation feels both appealing and terrifying." Robert understood her hesitation, recognizing his own version of the same concerns. "We don't have to define anything immediately," he said. "Perhaps we could simply allow this to develop naturally, without pressure or predetermined expectations." "That sounds reasonable," Catherine agreed, though her smile suggested she was as aware as he was that their feelings had already progressed beyond casual friendship. "We should probably catch up with the girls before they start wondering what happened to us." As they resumed walking toward the hotel, Robert felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with the tournament results. The weekend had confirmed that his attraction to Catherine was reciprocated, while also establishing that any relationship between them would need to accommodate the complex dynamics of their respective families. Back in their hotel suite, Sarah and Jennifer were reviewing video footage that another competitor's family had shot of their matches, analyzing their techniques with the serious attention of athletes committed to continuous improvement. The girls had clearly bonded beyond their shared martial arts interests, developing a genuine friendship that would endure regardless of how the relationship between their parents evolved. "What are you two plotting for tomorrow?" Catherine asked, settling onto the suite's couch while Robert prepared coffee in the kitchenette. "The team competition," Jennifer replied without looking up from the small television screen. "Sarah and I are wondering if we could compete together in next year's regional team kata division." The suggestion surprised both parents, representing a level of commitment that extended far beyond casual training partnerships. Team kata required months of synchronized preparation and implied that the girls saw their martial arts futures as interconnected in significant ways. "That would require extensive preparation," Robert observed, bringing coffee to Catherine while considering the implications of such a commitment, "and probably additional training sessions beyond what you're already doing." "We know," Sarah said, finally pausing the video player to look at her father directly. "But we work well together, and Sensei Nakamura thinks we could be competitive at the national level with proper preparation." As Robert processed this information, he realized that his daughter had already begun planning a future that assumed continued close contact between their families. Her suggestion represented not just athletic ambition, but implicit acceptance of whatever relationship might develop between Catherine and himself. Later that evening, as the suite settled into quiet preparation for Sunday's final competition day, Robert reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that first tournament in Riverside. What had begun as Sarah's individual martial arts journey had evolved into something that connected both their futures to Catherine and Jennifer Walsh in ways that felt both natural and profound. The weekend had one more day remaining, but already Robert knew that their return to their separate lives in Riverside and Orange County would be temporary. Whatever developed between Catherine and himself would need to honor the careful stability they had each created for their daughters while allowing space for the adult connection that was clearly developing between them. Sunday morning brought the tournament's final day with a sense of completion that extended beyond competition results. Robert woke early, finding Catherine already awake in the living area, sitting by the window with coffee and the tournament program, while their daughters slept peacefully in the adjacent room. The sunrise over San Diego Bay painted the sky in gentle pastels, creating a serene backdrop for what would be their last morning in the shared intimacy of the hotel suite. "The team competition starts at 10, Catherine said softly as Robert joined her with his own coffee. "Neither girl is competing individually today, so we can actually relax and observe other divisions." The absence of performance pressure had transformed the atmosphere completely. Instead of the controlled tension that had characterized Saturday, both families could simply enjoy watching elite-level karate without the emotional investment that came with having competitors on the mats. It was a luxury that Robert had rarely experienced during Sarah's tournament career. "I keep thinking about their team kata proposal," he said, settling into the chair beside Catherine, while appreciating the comfortable silence they had learned to share. "The commitment level would be substantial, but Sarah has never shown this kind of enthusiasm for extended training partnerships. Jennifer feels the same way. She's typically been content to train independently, focusing on individual achievement rather than collaborative efforts." Catherine paused, watching their daughters through the bedroom doorway, where they were beginning to stir. "I think they recognize something in their partnership that extends beyond martial arts technique." As the morning progressed and they prepared for the final day of competition, Robert reflected on how naturally their temporary family unit had functioned. The logistics of shared accommodation, coordinated meal schedules, and collaborative decision-making had proceeded smoothly, suggesting compatibility that extended well beyond their initial tournament convenience arrangement. The convention center felt different on Sunday, with the intensity of individual competition replaced by the celebratory atmosphere of team events and closing ceremonies. Sarah and Jennifer positioned themselves near the competition mats to study the team kata performances, taking notes and discussing the synchronization techniques that would be essential for their own collaborative efforts. "Those girls from Colorado are incredible," Sarah observed, watching a pair of competitors move through their kata with precision that seemed almost telepathic. "They must train together constantly to achieve that level of timing. 6 days a week." "According to their coach," Jennifer replied, having conducted informal interviews with several team competitors throughout the weekend. But they've been partners for 3 years. We could probably achieve similar results with consistent practice. Robert and Catherine exchanged glances that acknowledged the implications of such dedication. 6 days weekly training would require coordination between Orange County and Riverside that went far beyond their current Tuesday and Thursday arrangement. It would necessitate fundamental changes to both families' routines and would essentially formalize the connection that had been developing between them. "What do you think?" Catherine asked, as they watched the team competition progress through its preliminary rounds. "I think our daughters have decided something about their futures that we need to take seriously," Robert replied. "The question is whether we're prepared to support the level of commitment they're proposing." The tournament concluded with awards ceremonies that celebrated not just individual champions, but the broader community of martial artists who had gathered from across the southwestern United States. Sarah and Jennifer had earned respect through their performances, establishing themselves as competitors to watch in future regional events while gaining invaluable experience that would inform their continued development. As they packed their belongings and prepared for the return journey to Southern California, Robert felt the weight of decisions that needed to be made in the coming weeks. The weekend had confirmed his feelings for Catherine while demonstrating that their daughters had formed a partnership that transcended casual friendship. Moving forward would require honest conversations about expectations, logistics, and the kind of future they were willing to create together. "Drive time gives us 3 hours to discuss practical considerations," Catherine said as they loaded the Mercedes for the return trip. "The girls will probably sleep most of the way, so we can address some of the questions this weekend has raised." The drive north proceeded through the familiar landscape of Southern California, but Robert found himself seeing the terrain differently. The distance between Riverside and Orange County no longer seemed like a barrier, but rather a manageable gap that could be bridged through commitment and careful planning. The future that had seemed impossible 2 years ago now appeared not just possible, but inevitable. "I want to be direct about something," Catherine said, as they passed through the coastal communities north of San Diego. "This weekend has convinced me that what's developing between us deserves serious exploration, regardless of the complications it might create." Robert felt relief at her honesty, having wrestled with similar conclusions throughout their shared days in San Diego. "I agree completely. The question is how to proceed in ways that honor our daughters' needs, while allowing space for our own relationship to develop." Their conversation continued throughout the drive, covering practical considerations like housing arrangements, school districts, and career implications alongside deeper questions about readiness for commitment and blended family dynamics. By the time they reached the gas station in Mission Viejo, where they would transfer back to separate vehicles, they had established a framework for moving forward that felt both realistic and hopeful. "Tuesday training as usual?" Catherine asked as they transferred luggage between cars, the question carrying weight that extended far beyond karate schedules. "Definitely," Robert replied, understanding that they were committing to more than continued martial arts instruction, "and perhaps we could discuss dinner arrangements for afterward. The girls will probably want to review everything they learned this weekend." As they drove the final stretch toward Riverside, Sarah chattering excitedly about her tournament experience and her plans for team kata preparation, Robert reflected on how a chance encounter at a local competition had led to possibilities he had never imagined. The careful life he had constructed after Linda's death was expanding to include Catherine and Jennifer Walsh in ways that felt both natural and transformative. The Honda's dashboard clock read 4:47 p.m. as they pulled into their driveway, marking the end of a weekend that had changed everything while appearing to change nothing at all. Sarah's tournament gear still needed to be unpacked and organized. Homework assignments waited on her desk, and Monday morning would bring the familiar routine of work and school responsibilities. But underneath these surface continuities, Robert knew that fundamental shifts had occurred. The future now included possibilities that extended far beyond single parenthood and individual achievement. Catherine Walsh had become central to his thinking about what lay ahead, while Sarah's partnership with Jennifer suggested that their daughters had already begun planning lives that assumed continued close connection between their families. As evening settled over, Riverside and Sarah organized her tournament medals alongside previous achievements. Robert found himself looking forward to Tuesday's training session with anticipation that encompassed far more than martial arts instruction. The careful friendship that had begun in a tournament hall had evolved into something deeper and more substantial, promising a future that honored The past while embracing new possibilities. For happiness and connection, the story that had begun with a widowed black belt. Attending his daughter's tournament had become something neither simple nor predictable, but ultimately, it had become a story about second chances and the courage required to embrace them when they appeared unexpectedly in the most ordinary circumstances.